This is Perspective on Athletics, big thinking for small colleges. Sit back and enjoy this episode. Okay, we are here with Dan Giuliani of Volt Athletics, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Volt and what they're doing for strength and conditioning at collegiate campuses and a lot of high school campuses. And Dan, I really appreciate you taking time and joining us here.
Well, thanks a lot, Mark. I'm appreciative that you had me on.
Absolutely. Well, I came across your company actually in some email news release that I saw that some campus back east, it may have been St. Michael's or St. Joseph, one of those, they signed up to use your services for a number of their sports, and I thought that that was intriguing, that on a sport-by-sport basis there was somebody outsourcing strength and conditioning services. So I thought that was interesting. I learned a little bit more about you, and since then have talked to you and met you in person to learn even more about your company. And I thought it was a great idea and a great product that we could bring to some people that may not be aware of what you're trying to do yet. So we're going to talk more about Volt and what you guys are providing for schools. But first, give me a brief sketch of kind of who you are, where you came from, and how all this plays into the launch of Volt Athletics.
Sure. Yeah. It's a relatively simple story. So I was a Division III football player. So my world was as an athlete was small college. I came out of college. I started coaching. I got interested in strength and conditioning along with coaching football, and ended up in a position at Endicott College on the North Shore of Boston as a football coach / strength coach. And in both that experience as well as my playing experience and pretty much talking to any small college coach or high school coach that I'd come across, there was a really common issue with strength and conditioning resources at that level. And as I came out of that job and was looking for maybe something a little bit more steady, a little bit more interesting that used more breadth of my skills, I started working kind of in the private sector doing strength and conditioning, and realized that there was a lot of work being done by good people, but they were very expensive in the private sector. But on college campuses, they were so prohibitively expensive that Division III schools, NAIA schools, junior colleges, even high schools couldn't often afford the full-time personnel to really provide their athletes the strength and conditioning resources that the athletes really needed. And considering that the industry has really gone to a place in strength and conditioning where it's becoming accepted in more sports than just football and some of the more traditional power-based sports, that strength and conditioning not only will help with performance, but also the reduction of injuries and kind of a proactive approach to keeping athletes healthy. It seemed to me that now was the right time to really look to try to provide some affordable resources for schools who can't find it in their budget for the full-time strength and conditioning personnel that you might see at the Division I level. And that was really kind of the germination of Volt Athletics. And it's actually a fun story. I partnered with my best friend from high school, who was a tech guy, and I knew the strength and conditioning side. We both had just enough business acumen that we wanted to take a shot at this, and we started developing a web-based platform that could provide coaches around the country and around the world with strength and conditioning programming that really gave them both the expertise and the structure that they could put in place at their school for their teams. And we started that project about 3.5–4 years ago. It took us quite some time to develop the technology, and we started testing it, and then we actually launched it in July of 2013. So we're still in our first year. But it's been going really well, and it's been a really fun ride.
Well, it's interesting, and that was what was so intriguing to me, is that for the small colleges in particular, where strength and conditioning coaches are starting to make their way into staffs, but not really across the board, yet strength and conditioning continues to become more and more important to the success of programs, and like you said, not only performance-based, but also reducing injuries and all of that, that this was a way to get strength and conditioning expertise into the coach's hands and not leave it up to a coach or somebody else who happened to be an assistant football coach that knew a little bit about it.
Right.
So what I also found interesting, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, is that you're not talking about a basic across the board strength and conditioning program. You guys provide a very detailed sport by sport year-round program that is very prescriptive, that for literally almost any sport, somebody can follow your program and have just the right exercises at just the right time.
Yeah, exactly. You know, what we did, Mark, is we actually went and spoke with as many strength coaches as we could. I'm myself a CSCS certified strength coach. We brought in a team of consulting strength coaches to try to build into the platform the logic that strength coaches typically fall back on when they're programming for teams. You know, it's not as if strength coaches are coming up with workouts and programs out of thin air all the time. There's a pretty industry standard approach and a logic behind how you structure this. So what we did was we set about trying to build that structure into the technology, so that when a coach or a school were to bring Volt in as their resource, they're not just getting access to workouts. They're actually getting access to a whole 52-week periodized sport-specific training program that's been built really and designed for their level of athletes. You know, we're not training Olympic caliber athletes. We're training small college kids. And that's always been kind of the way that we've approached the programming, and wanted to build something that for the vast majority of athletes was going to take them from a level where they have that drive and determination, they have good coaches around them, they just don't necessarily have that strength and conditioning expertise that they can access. We give that to them. We still rely on the coaches who work hands-on with the athletes every day, because an online training program is never going to motivate your kids. It's never going to teach them the perfect techniques. But we try to provide all the resources to the athletes and the coaches so that those coaches can put the programming in place.
Yeah, it's great, and I think it's really an amazing setup, so that every single sport that is on a campus is going to have something specific for their training regime. But what about those places? Again, I said small colleges are catching up a little bit, where many have started to hire strength and conditioning professionals. Yet, I think one of the problems is that even if they do have a strength and conditioning person on their campus, that person usually also is responsible for managing the fitness center or weight room, and then they're also responsible for every single team, and in some cases that might be 400, 500, 600 student athletes, and that seems a bit overwhelming. So where does your system potentially play in with an existing strength and conditioning coach on a campus?
Yeah, you know, the more we've talked to different coaches, the more I've learned that the environments at the college level vary tremendously when it comes to this particular resource. And you're right, there's a really positive trend towards schools bringing in strength coaches and valuing that expertise and that certification. And you're also right that at most small colleges, those folks have multiple jobs, because if they're going to fill out a full-time salary, it's not usually just strength and conditioning. And now some have hired completely full-time strength coaches, and that's amazingly forward-thinking. If they can get it in the budget every year for that, that's the best situation you can have. But you're right, even those people often are strapped for certain resources at certain times during the year, and they have so many athletes and sports to deal with. So there's a couple ways that Volt really fits into the puzzle. If there's no strength coach at all, and it's more of a department that's left up to each coach to use the facility to come up with their own training program, Volt can really provide that cohesion that's often missing from those departments. Every sport has the opportunity to train for, as you mentioned, a sport-specific training program, but all of the workouts and all of the programs are actually integrated with each other. So a swim team that's going to be training in the weight room and a football team is training in the weight room, although those movements might be different, each day of workouts is going to interact with other days differently. The patterns, the loading, the volumes are all going to be unique. The structure of training is very similar, and there are common threads across the different workouts. So you can share a facility amongst 15, 20 teams that all want to use it at different times and still be able to be efficient with that time and space.
Got it.
And then you talk about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
No worries. Then you talk about the situation where you have the strength coach at the school. And these are great. Actually, this is the perfect school for us to work with, because with one point of contact, with one singular person on campus, who does have that hands-on expertise, who can teach technique, who can keep athletes accountable, can keep them safe, and can be the point person for all the other coaches on campus when it comes to strength and conditioning. We can provide that person with the full 52 weeks of training and all the structural tools to be able to track the athlete's progress, to be able to keep them accountable, and to give the coaches the power to access training for certain times of the year where maybe that coach isn't available. So you talk about the football coach / strength coach, which is probably the most common example. Yep. The fall is football time, right? It's you're on the field, you're at practice, but there's still teams using the weight room. And so realistically, that coach can't be in there with the athletes at that time. But the athletes can access their workouts through Volt. The coaches can access the workouts through Volt. Volt can continue to provide the structure of the training for those coaches and those athletes, even at the times during the year where that coach might be pulled away for other duties.
Got it. So one thing that naturally popped into my head when I first was looking at your system, and we've talked about this, so I know you've thought through this, but for Division III institutions, there's this issue of non-traditional seasons and then out-of-season workouts, and while there absolutely is a need for kids to train out of season, there are rules in place that say they can't hold them accountable or provide consequences if they're not keeping them up. So what about that issue with NCAA compliance for Division III level institutions? What have you guys talked about, or how does that work if somebody at a Division III institution is saying, well, this is great, but I don't think we can use it?
Right. So actually, a few years ago when we started Volt, first thing I did was actually sit down and read through the bylaws of the NCAA and figure out if it was even possible. Was it going to be allowed by regulation? And I actually called the NCAA and I asked if they would potentially review and kind of audit our service and provide some sort of stamp saying this is NCAA approved, so everybody didn't have to worry about it. They said that they don't do that, so we've had to basically just rely on interactions with compliance directors around the country, different athletic directors, and try to do everything we can to stay on the right side of those compliance regulations. So here's how it usually breaks down. Volt is the structure of training that's available to the athletes, and it's a yearly subscription. So if a team jumps on Volt or a school brings Volt in as their resource for the department, the training's available to the kids 365 days a year, in season, out of season, those kind of non-traditional dead periods. The training is there, and it's a third party, which is us, providing the training. What the coach has done, if they're the ones who've decided to purchase Volt or the school has, is they're providing access for the athletes, should the athletes choose to access the training through the online portal, right, through the platform that we've built. There are ways for coaches during the right time of the year to check in on the kids and see whether they're using the system. What they can do is see if athletes signed in, have they updated their progress, have they shown kind of as they're getting stronger, updated what we call strength numbers in the system. But other times during the year, coaches can stay completely out of that part of Volt. In fact, they never have to sign in, they never have to access anything that would potentially put them in a gray area. We're actually about to take it one step further, which I'm really excited about. We're building an entire accountability section, a feature within Volt that's going to include a compliance mode where a coach can toggle a switch that will put them into a place where they couldn't access that information even if they tried. Right now, if they really wanted to, they could find things out about their athletes, and if they use that information against the athletes in regards to playing time or they cut them, they could get into trouble. But the reality is they also have cell phones, and they could call recruits at any time, at any point, and get themselves in trouble. So, but we think that compliance mode is a really cool feature because it's not only going to help coaches stay out of that gray area, but it's also going to show anybody who might be wondering that there was no possible way they could have been in a compliance violation because they're toggled into that compliance mode.
Exactly. Well, I think the bottom line here is that you've thought through this, you've consulted the NCAA, you've consulted a number of different compliance officers on several different campuses, and it really is up to each campus to determine what's okay and what's not, but there's enough evidence here that says the way that it's structured, it certainly would be permissible. Everyone is going to have their own comfort level, but certainly there are campuses within Division III utilizing your system because they feel that it falls within the NCAA bylaws and what is permissible. So I know we're going to get a demo here in just a couple of minutes and actually see this in action, but it's a web-based system. Kids would log on, coaches would log on. The other question that came up for me, and I know that you've had some discussions about this as well, is obviously you've done a lot of research. You've talked to lots of different strength and conditioning coaches across the country at many different levels and built your programs sport by sport based on all this research that you've done. What about the strength and conditioning coach what if I'm a strength and conditioning coach and I have my way of doing things and we have our way of doing things on our campus, so why would I need Volt Athletics? What about for that individual or that type of department? Where does Volt potentially play into helping them too?
Yeah, we're having all of those conversations right now. As you said, we have a lot of really good relationships with strength coaches. I was initially concerned when we started this that the strength and conditioning industry was going to push back, thinking maybe that this could be a way that coaches might lose jobs. And that was a concern of mine. As we started talking to more D1 coaches, D2, D3, even high school coaches, there was a really warm acceptance of what we were building because of exactly what kind of you just described. There's a future here. There's a way that their programming, which you're 100% right. Strength coaches really like what they do. In fact, one of the hardest things to do is to go into a strength coach's office and sit there and say, well, our way is better, right? Our way is not necessarily better. It's our delivery system that's better. Our delivery system is very unique. And so I've been to LSU and sat down with Tommy Moffitt, who's a legendary strength coach. I've been to the NSCA headquarters in Colorado Springs and sat down with Boyd Epley, who is the godfather of modern collegiate strength and conditioning. It was at Nebraska forever. And I've gotten their feedback and thoughts, and what they love and what strength coaches love about this is as we continue to build this thing out, as we continue to provide kind of more flexibility within our system, we can take programming that strength coaches build and deliver it to their athletes. In fact, that's actually one of the ways it's being utilized right now, the platform is we're working with strength coaches to build their programming into the system to provide only to their athletes, and especially their incoming athletes. So when we're having this conversation in early mid-April, this is the time where you're starting to get a lot of athletes committing to where they're going to play. They've signed letters of intent, or they're starting to put their deposits in if they're at a D3 school, and coaches are sending out packets of workouts. Now the workout packets have been sent out for, I don't know, 30 years, and they're not great. And kids get them, and they don't really know what to do with them, and they guess. And there's sort of, you can argue how safe it is for kids to just look at a piece of paper and try to do it. In comparison, the Volt platform enables coaches to actually send their athletes a login. So you're a high school athlete, you just committed to play, in this case, football at LSU, or we're working with the University of Vermont. So you're an alpine skier in Vermont. And you've got a workout now that you can access cloud-based systems, so anywhere you can sign in on your cell phone, on a tablet, or a PC anywhere in the world. You can access your workouts, and it's built with a progression in place in collaboration with these coaches. So they know that their athletes coming in when they show up on campus for the first time are going to have some sort of basic level of proficiency when it comes to the certain movement patterns that they've prescribed. And that's where I see it, and we're careful here because we don't want to branch ourselves off, because our real niche market, I mean, this is the same market that you cater to, right? I mean, it's niche, it's small colleges, it's not everybody in the world. We're not providing something to professional athletes, we're not providing something to middle school kids, we're not providing something to weekend warrior, CrossFit style athletes, right? We're very niche-y. It's high school and small college sport performance is what we do. So as much as we really like and we're excited by the concept of putting strength coach programming into our system and getting it out to some really high-level athletes, what we're worried about is kind of branching off too soon, splitting focus, and not necessarily staying true to who we built this for in the first place, which are those small colleges and high schools.
Yeah, well, that all sounds great, and I know we're going to get to this demo here. One other thing before we get to that, though, and I think voltathletics.com is your website. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
voltathletics.com, people can learn a little bit more for themselves, and I believe even sign up for a demo account to get a much better feel
Sure.
for it, which we're going to show them in a little bit as well. But for those, I know that you have several small colleges involved, and so the other thing that naturally comes into people's mind is, well, can we afford this? If we can't afford a strength and conditioning coach, are
Yeah.
we just replacing an actual person with an online service? And can you at least speak to the affordability of your product and service and how coaches can go about that, or departments can? Because I know you have an option either sport by sport, or you have a all department wide program as well.
Right. Yeah, we didn't build Volt so that it wouldn't be used, right? The double negative in this case, I think, is appropriate. We built the darn thing so that it could be affordable. Because if it's not affordable, then it's useless because it's designed for a market that can't afford the full-time strength coach staffs that you see at other places. So we've actually gone recently to a flat pricing model, which I think is really nice. We used to look at how many athletes specifically were going to be on the team, how many were going to use it. It got very complicated very quickly. So what we've done is we've looked at things starting with the athlete by athlete model. And it's an interesting way to look at it. So, and I'll explain it briefly. We provide a product to individual athletes anywhere in the world. They can sign up for Volt outside of a team. They just jump online, put in a credit card, and it's $25 a month. It's kind of like an inexpensive gym membership. They get most of the features you get as a team, except you're just on your own. There's no team around you, no coach, just you training. If you extrapolate that out over the year, that's $300 a year for an individual athlete to train on Volt. Not an affordable cost structure if you just add together all the athletes on the team and tell them that's how much it costs. So we looked at creating some kind of lower flat rates that are, we think, quite affordable in a fundraising way for teams, or if they're able to slide some money around in their budget. And we've settled in on a pretty easy place. So for most sports of smallish size, it's $1,000 for the year. And that could basically unlimited athletes within your sport. For football, you get a lot more athletes. You actually have more training sessions throughout the year. It's a much bigger production. That's typically about 2,000. And if they're really big teams, that can grow. So there is still a little bit of variability there. But those are our kind of basic price structures. And then for a whole athletic department, we cap the pricing at $8,000. So the idea there is that we're not approaching anything close to what it costs to bring in a strength coach. Because if departments can find, the 25, 30, 35, if you want to get a good one, you're probably higher than that, or an experienced strength coach, I should say. If you're approaching that number and you're close on the budget, we're nowhere approaching that level. So we're kind of quite a bit below, and we've still found it's the number one factor that works against school bringing Volt in, is just how are we going to come up with an extra 8,000 that we hadn't anticipated. But here's the good thing. The good thing is if you believe in strength and conditioning and you believe in what it can do for athletes, you believe in cohesion in a department, and to take what I think is actually a bit of a liability away by not allowing sport coaches who don't necessarily have the expertise to develop their own training programs. And you say we want to trust something that we believe is built by real experts and we can put in place, or at least provide as a resource, then I think it's a pretty swallowable budget line. And we've gotten a lot of athletic trainers that'll stand behind it and say the same thing and say, look, unless you want everybody coming into my room all the time, we need to provide a good training program so they can proactively stay healthy.
Well, it's great. I think that for most programs, there would be some way to come up with that sort of dollar amount. I think whether it's through a fundraising effort or through departmental budget, when you look at the benefits, it really far outweighs the annual expense that somebody might have to incur or department might have to incur. Well, I want to take a look at this, and I want to see this in action a little bit because I think it's pretty impressive the way that you all have put it together. So are you ready to give us a little demo here?
Absolutely. Let's go for it.
Okay, great. Okay, we're set here, Dan. Let's take us through what Volt Athletics and your online system is all about.
Sure. So we're starting here at a customized login page. So what we do for each school that we work with is we create a login page that's unique to them. And you can see the URL up here for Seattle College, fake school. We're located in Seattle, where we're born and raised. And so we came up with this little Space Needle logo, by the way, which is pretty slick. But we create a unique URL for the athletes and the coaches to log in at. And this is a cool way for coaches, for schools. You can link this through a strength and conditioning page or through an athletics website. Really anchors the athletes in so that they know, hey, this is my school that's providing me with this training. So we start here. I'm logging in as a sample coach. And you can see when you log in that you've got, I'm not going to save our password, that you've got this customized platform to Seattle College. So we've gone with a navy and kind of blue and white theme. We, as I said, do this for each of the schools, and it's a really fun way to get buy-in from the athletes, from the coaches, that it's really their program. We're just powering it. We're just providing it through the platform. What you're looking at here is you're looking at a demo of a coach account. So I've got a fake coach named John Smith. He's chosen an awesome #1 coach hat as his picture. And you can see we're at Seattle College in Seattle, Washington. The athlete experience is actually relatively similar to the coach experience. I'll point out a couple key differences, but when you kind of take a look at this as a coach, it's actually quite similar. You can imagine it as an athlete pretty easily. Where we are is we're at the workout page for a particular team within the school. So I've built a couple teams here. This is the Seattle College football team. This would be lacrosse, and I've got a women's soccer team built as well. And I will flip over to the soccer team here in a little bit. If we stay with football to start with, this is the page from which coaches would do most of their actions on a day-to-day basis. This is where you print off workouts. All you do is click day 1 or day 2 or day 3, in this case day 4, and you can get the workouts for your whole team. We'll do that in a second. There's coach notes boxes where coaches can put in anything they want for their athletes. As we talked about, there are certain times of the year where you wouldn't want to be communicating anything to your kids. But if you're a strength coach using this platform, or an athletic trainer, or anyone who is designated to be able to work with the athletes throughout the year, it's a really good way to communicate with the athletes on their workouts, and I'll show you where that's generated as well. Every sport also has with it a 12-week sport-specific conditioning plan that goes along with the kind of traditional strength and power work that we're doing in the weight room. Speed, agility, quickness drills, and as you scroll down as well, we have a series we call primers and finishers. And the primers, which I've just opened up here, are a series of specific routines designed to achieve a particular adaptation for athletes who maybe need some extra work in certain categories. Primers are done before the workout. Finishers are done after the workout. So there's some core, some metabolic conditioning, in this case grip strength. And we're consistently coming up with new content to fill into those sections. Really great way for coaches to customize and individualize the workouts for the kids by steering them towards those particular routines. So that's the layout of the basic page. What we do here is we actually start on a different page. We start on the training calendar page. I'm going to flip over to that to kind of show you what this is. This is where we create a customized week-by-week sport-specific periodization for a particular team. So in this case, it's a football program. We're looking at certain key dates, when the season's going to start, when it's going to end, and then when the team wants to start their training. So in this case, I've started my team's training in February. It could start earlier in January. It could start later. We'll create the periodization that's appropriate for that team. And here's a week-by-week breakdown. So you can see we start with a GPP phase, which stands for General Physical Preparedness, very basic foundational movements, and that's here for 3 weeks in February. And then we move through different phases of training. Hypertrophy, strength, we unload the athletes. We have power phases, max strength phases, and we roll through this periodization up until the season starts. In this case, I've picked the week of August 17th. And then we roll into a 2-day-a-week in-season schedule. We roll through until the season ends, and then we flip into a postseason cycle. So we do take care of all 52 weeks of the year for the athletes. And so when they sign in, or the coaches sign in, we go back to our workout page we're going to be on the appropriate week of training that we should be on. In this case, it's off season. We're in the strength phase, and we are in the third week of 3 weeks of that phase. We can flip back 1 week and go to week 2. We can stay this week, week 3, or if we wanted to flip forward, we could flip ourselves into an unload week, which is the next week coming up. So it's a way for coaches to preview what their athletes are going to be doing next week. From this page, very basic concepts from a usability standpoint. You click day 1, you're going to wait about 10 seconds, and even if you have 200 athletes on your team, you're going to have every workout generated for your athletes in these 10 seconds. So there it is. This is Carl's workout. This is Charles' workout. This is Dwayne's workout, and it's just going to continue to roll through. We wanted to make a single touch point where you click, you get the workouts for that day. If we take a look at the actual workout itself, and I can zoom in just a little bit here to get a good view. We look at Dwayne's workout. It's got his picture, his name. It's got it has the notes from the coach, that coach notes section that we talked about. And this coach has decided to put in an inspirational quote. And then based off of how strong Dwayne is, we have these 3 representative strength numbers. We use the hang clean, the back squat, and the bench press. We will dictate to Dwayne what he should be doing on each of these lifts. So in this case, he's starting on body weight explosive step-ups, and we give him the sets and reps. We're going to provide him with some information about how to do that movement correctly because it's a little more technical. And then we'll take him through his workout really precisely. And this is a big differentiator for what Volk can bring to the table. For this athlete, for his first set of back squats, we're asking him to squat 220 pounds 5 times. Second squat set 260 for 4, his third set 295 for 3, and so on. This is based off of an algorithmic structure. It's a system that strength coaches use around the country, and it's built off of this periodized philosophy where we can build the athletes up and we can progress them set to set. We can also pull them back as necessary. So that unload week that's coming up next week for this team, that would have a reduced volume, also reduced loading, and would very specifically dictate to the athletes what they should be doing in their training. It's the best way to keep athletes healthy just from the program structure. You won't see overtraining. You won't see athletes burning out or hitting plateaus, as colloquially is known, when they kind of reach a cap on their progress. Our athletes continue to progress sustainably because it's all been built with a kind of a scientific proven methodology in mind.
Got it. And then each individual athlete is given their own workout. So Dwayne Clement's there, you input starting points or benchmarks or something, and it develops his individualized training program, correct?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Now, that said, it's still built for teams to train together. So if you imagine a football team in a weight room, and hopefully they're not all in there at the exact same time, but got a lot of athletes and they're sharing the equipment. Everything needs to be organized. Otherwise, there's no way that the structure is going to work. So the movements are the same. They're going to be consistent for the athletes. Day 1 for Dwayne is the same as day 1 as we scroll down for Robert, which is the same as day 1 for Matt. But the loading, the intensities of the different lifts are going to vary for each athlete based off of how strong they are. And then there are other elements, other ways to individualize the training. And we spoke to a lot of strength coaches about this as we put the programming together, and asked exactly that question. You know, should we be allowing for individualization when it comes to the actual movements themselves? And the overwhelming response from strength coaches was no, because from a team training perspective, you've got to keep cohesion. Everybody has to be able to kind of know what each other are doing. You have to be able to pair off into groups and be efficient in the use of the time and the space. But each athlete will get a workout designed for them based off of where their team is at. As you can see, this is going to mirror where we were at in the calendar. So it's a strength phase. It's week 3 of 3. It's day 1. We happen to be in the week of of April 6th. It's going to pull his strength, his characteristics, and where that team is training to provide him with that workout.
Okay. Very impressive.
That's
Very impressive.
Thanks. Yeah, that's the basic setup. Now, there's a couple other things that I want to point out which are worth noting. We also provide to coaches something we call a coach sheet, and I'm going to generate day one to mirror what we just saw for the athletes. Now, this sheet is designed for the coach, him or herself, to take with them into the weight room and be able to coach up the athletes on the workouts. So if it's a time during the year where the coaches are allowed to be there with the athletes in training, or for a strength coach who's going to be working with the athletes, this coach is going to get a printout that's designed for him to be able to coach his athletes properly. So if we look at that same set of back squats, that same sequence, he sees the volumes, he sees the name of the lift, a representative picture, but the real key here are these coaching points. For every lift, there are going to be coaching points that coach can use to help their athletes get the movements right, and to use consistent terminology and to really kind of reinforce all of the right coaching cues. And this is something that was a very large part of the development of Volt, was actually collaborating with strength coaches on the coaching cues themselves, what to say, what not to say, how to best communicate through 4, maybe even 5 bullet points, how to get each movement correct. And so that's a resource that's available to the coaches as well. If we go back over here to the main page, we've looked at the workout. As I said, there's a conditioning plan, speed, agility, quickness, and some other things to add to the workouts as well. That's all fun stuff to look at. But I want to jump over here to the roster and just kind of show quickly how easy it is to add athletes to a team. In this case, we've got these 5 athletes in this fake football team. And you can very easily take any other athlete that's in the system, which in this case means that they're in the school. So they have maybe an account made for them because they also play baseball. So if you want to add Jason Craig to this football team, it's as easy as just selecting him from the drop-down and adding him to the team. And now Jason's right there, and now his workout will be printed out as well. You can also use this page to select a couple different athletes and go ahead and print day one. If you hit submit, it's just going to create the workout for those 2 athletes rather than for the whole team. And also from this page, and probably the coolest part of this page, is the athlete's profiles. So this is a place where you can look at each athlete as they're training and see their progress. So it's a graphical representation of where this athlete started back on August 13th, 2012. And then as he has progressed, we'll track each data point along the way. And then you can just see the kind of raw numbers every time that his strength is increased. He's inputted numbers back into the system. This is something athletes can view as well from their profile, but as a coach, you actually get access to seeing how your athletes are progressing. Similarly, if you go over, and just flipped back to the workout page, if you go over to the metrics page, and this is one of the kind of our enhanced metrics, ways you can view your team, and this is all kind of falls under that same spectrum of, if you're not supposed to be looking at what your team is doing, don't access this page. It'll be what we shut off in compliance mode when that's built. What this does is it ranks the athletes in the top 5s for every category. You can start with top performers in all of your classes. If you want to split it up by just the class of 2015 or 16, you can instead arrange it by power index instead of pure max strength, which now shows which athletes are strongest pound for pound in each of the 3 lifts plus the combined, which is a really cool way to look at your team. Yep. You can also do some other things from this list. You can also use this page to look at a couple other attributes of your team. One of the coolest things on here is just comparing athletes head-to-head. So if you choose comparison, you pick 2 athletes, and you arrange it by, say, in this case, just their max strength. You can look at how Dwayne compares to Carl in this particular case in each of the categories. So if you want to see 2 athletes head-to-head, maybe they're in a positional battle, you want to see who's bringing more to the table from a physical standpoint, you can also flip it over to pound for pound strength, as I mentioned before, see who's the stronger athlete pound for pound. And then also down here, these are rankings. So each one of these columns is sortable. So you can easily rank your athletes top to bottom by height, weight, how strong they are in the clean squat bench combined, their power index, when they've last updated their numbers. So for athletes, say a strength coach is monitoring their athletes over the summer, they want to see who's engaging in the program. They can see when they've last updated those strength numbers showing their progress, and also when they've last been online to access their workouts. Cool. And then the last thing to show you here, Mark, is maybe one of the more interesting parts of what we provide, which is the exercise library. So within Volt, every single movement that we ever ask an athlete to perform is going to be cataloged in this library. Pictures, we have step-by-step instructions, coaching points, suggestions for alternate movements, as well as, in this case, a video that's going to show the technique to the athletes. This is a really cool way for athletes to be able to learn about the movements, as well as coaches to be able to learn how to teach those movements to their athletes. And we have about 500 or so movements categorized. It's a really cool thing to explore from top to bottom. If anybody gets in here and plays around with a demo, this is something I highly recommend checking out. But it's really a system unlike any other when it comes to providing the resources and the mechanism to get the lift right, along with actually prescribing those movements.
Right.
So that's basically it. That's kind of the full look at the Volt platform as it exists today.
Well, I think, Dan, obviously there is so much more. This was just a brief thumbnail sketch into what your whole system does. But what's impressive to me is the ease at which somebody can dive in and get a lot out of this. It's not overly technical. Everything is laid out nicely. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, for a coach that doesn't necessarily have a background in strength and conditioning, but still knows it's very important for his or her athletes to get on a program, this provides a way to do that in a not so intimidating way, and a way to keep track of everything. So that is very impressive. And I know that you guys put a lot of energy into your research and development, and now you're just rolling this out. When did you actually launch all of this and roll it out kind of publicly?
It was in July of 2013. Yeah, we started with about 8 or so different beta testing schools, and we've grown since then. I think here we are about 9 months later, and we have over 120 schools, over 350 different teams, and we're closing in on about 7,000 athletes that are training on the system, and that has been in only about 9 months. So we're pleased with how it's spreading, but it's, you know what the best part about it, Mark, is? It's the ability to impact so many athletes. I don't know of any strength coaches that have been able to do anything like this when it comes to really spreading the impact out onto kids that they haven't actually had the physical contact with, and that's been really fun for us.
Yeah, it is really amazing. So just short of a year of really being public and going live with this, and a number of different colleges and universities taking advantage of it. Very, very impressive, Dan. And so I want to make sure people know where to go. It's voltathletics.com. And not only can you learn more about it, there's contact information there for Dan and other folks there, but you can also sign up for a demo account so that you can play around with it. Is that the case? Is it kind of a full functioning demo, or how does the demo account work, Dan?
It's a partially functioning demo. Yeah, it gives you a taste of what it's like. It's just our basic Volt platform with our black and red logos, and it has certain features that are locked down. We only provide to the schools that actually jump on board, but it does give you the opportunity to click around, generate a few workouts, and kind of get a sense of how the whole thing works. But I would highly recommend, definitely the website has a lot of great information, and please do reach out if anybody is interested in what we do and wants to talk about what it would look like potentially at their school, because as you know, every college is going to be unique in their environment, and if there's a good fit for Volt, then we can usually find a way to make it work.
Well, exactly. And the reason I was so excited about this is that I do think it's a great fit for small colleges and universities that don't have all the resources or staffing in the world. And it's something worth checking out. So Volt Athletics, it's voltathletics.com. Dan Giuliani, I want to thank you again for not only joining us and talking to us, but giving us this great demonstration.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Mark. I had a lot of fun.
Well, terrific. Well, thanks again. This has been Perspective on Athletics. Until next time, I'm Mark Majeski, and for Dan Giuliani, thanks again. Bye-bye.